The galaxy had rules. Civilizations rose, not through brute force, but through elegant mastery of energy, subtle psychic harmonies, and ancient, dignified traditions. War was a distant, vulgar memory for most. For eons, the Galactic Consortium had observed lesser species, offering membership only to those who achieved a prescribed state of serene, non-violent enlightenment. Humanity's application was met with dismissive amusement. These humans were a mess of contradictions, brilliant artists and savage brawlers, profound philosophers and reckless children. They were quarantined to their solar system, a violent spectacle for bored aristocrats to watch from orbit, a living museum of primitive folly. They were considered harmless, a fascinating but ultimately pathetic example of how not to evolve. Everyone knew this. It was galactic fact, until the day the unbound devourer, a ravenous entity from the void between galaxies, ignored all pleas, treaties, and psychic deterrents, and tore into the heart of the consortium. As fleets vanished, worlds fell silent, and the pinnacle of civilized power proved utterly useless. The spectators looked down in panic at the quarantined, violent, pathetic planet below. And from that planet, amidst the chaos, one man received orders not to retreat, not to negotiate, but to engage. His name was Kalen Vance, a sergeant of the United Terran Marine Corps. And he was about to teach a soft, civilized galaxy the terrifying, beautiful meaning of a simple, forgotten word: sacrifice. The observation galleries of the Celestial Arbiter, a consortium vessel the size of a small moon, hanging in geostationary orbit above Earth, were packed. Elegant beings of light and crystal, floating gas bags adorned with intricate jewelry, and sturdy mineral-based life forms sipped effervescent fluids and watched the planetary display below. It was conflict season on the North American continent, and the humans were putting on a particularly brutal show. Fascinating. Trill the Sinorian, its feathery appendages gesturing at a hologram, depicting a sprawling urban battlefield. Observe the tactical incoherence. They expend vast resources to capture a single city block, only to relinquish it the next day. It is like watching infants quarrel over toys. A Xyloc, its body a shifting mosaic of polished stone, rumbled in agreement. Their technology is a crude parody. Chemical projectiles? Unshielded fission reactors? They poison their own biosphere to power their violence. It is tragically quaint. This was the consensus. Humanity, for all its frantic energy, was a dead end. The consortium monitored them as a precaution and a pastime. Their application for membership, submitted a decade prior, was a source of endless gentle humor. They had not even begun to grasp the fundamental requirements: societal harmony, the abandonment of systemic violence, the cultivation of shared psychic awareness. On the surface, in the ruins of a city once called Chicago, Sergeant Kalen Vance did not feel quaint. He felt the gritty concrete dust in his teeth, the ache of 60 hours of constant movement in his bones, and the cold weight of his rifle in his hands. Around him, his squad, Lopez, Chun, and the rookie Finn, huddled behind a collapsed wall. The air crackled with the snap of passing rounds and the distant thump of artillery. "Command says the bogies are falling back to the river," Lopez said, her eyes glued to the scope of her rifle. "We push, we can pin them." Kalen glanced at the sky, a habit he'd developed not for tactical reason, but for a strange, personal defiance. He knew they were watching. Everyone on Earth knew. The alien ships were permanent fixtures in the sky, silent and judgmental. "We push," he confirmed, his voice a gravelly whisper. "But stay sharp. This feels too easy." They moved as a unit, a fluid dance honed by years of war against their own kind. They communicated with hand signals and barely audible clicks over the comms. They used the terrain, the shadows, the rubble. To the spectators above, it looked like primitive skulking. They did not see the profound trust, the shared breath, the language of survival that had evolved in the absence of peace. As they reached a shattered plaza, the trap was sprung. Not from the enemy humans, but from the sky. A blinding lance of violet energy, silent and searing, struck the building to their left, vaporizing it into molten slag. Then another, and another. The ground shook with a different frequency, not the crude boom of human explosives, but a deep, subsonic thrum that vibrated the marrow in their bones. The squad hit the ground. What the hell was that? Finn yelled, panic edging his voice. Did the Euros get a new toy? Kalen looked up. The familiar, sleek silhouettes of the consortium observers were gone. The sky was now filled with something else. Something monstrous. Vessels that looked like twisted, organic nightmares, pulsating with a sickly green light, were descending. They were not aiming for military targets. One of the violet beams lanced down into the lake, sending up a plume of steam taller than mountains. Another struck the western suburbs, and a ring of silent, expanding annihilation erased everything in its path. The comms erupted into a chaos of panicked voices. Command! Command, what is happening? Unidentified craft are engaging. They're just wiping out everything. A new voice, strained and official, crackled over the battalion channel. All units, this is a Category X event. Non terrestrial hostile. Weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. Engage at will. The squad watched as human jets, the pinnacle of their atmospheric combat technology, scrambled. They fired missiles that streaked towards the alien vessels. The missiles detonated harmlessly against shimmering energy fields a kilometer from the hulls. The alien ships did not even return fire. They ignored the jets, continuing their methodical, planet-wide bombardment. Then, the giant consortium ship, the Celestial Arbiter, moved. It had always been a passive, serene sight. Now it glowed with magnificent, terrifying energy. Beams of pure white light speared from its hull, striking the invading ships. The galaxy was at war above their heads. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Kalen felt a surge of hope. The wise, powerful aliens were fighting the monsters. Then, a single tendril of green energy, like a serpent of lightning, lashed out from the largest invader. It touched the Celestial Arbiter. The great ship's shields flared brilliant gold, and then shattered like glass. The tendril wrapped around its midsection, and with a silent, terrifying contraction, the Celestial Arbiter was torn in two. The subsequent explosion was soundless in the vacuum, but the light was a second, cruel sun that bleached the ruins white. Silence fell on the human comms. The ultimate power they had lived under, resented, and silently relied upon had been broken like a toy. Kalen's private comlink buzzed, a secure, encrypted line. It was a voice he knew well, Colonel Hayes from the deep underground bunker network known as the Arkansas Vance. Squad status. Alive, sir. For now. Listen carefully. The consortium is broadcasting on all frequencies. It's a general distress. That thing is called an unbound devourer. It consumes biomass and consciousness. Their weapons, their diplomacy, their psychic, whatever, it's laughing at them. It's heading for their core worlds. They are there begging for anyone who can fight. Kalen barked a bitter laugh, watching a city burn. And they're looking at us? They're not looking at us, Sergeant. They've written us off. The distress call is generic. But I'm not. The Ark Council has voted. We're not going to hide and wait for that thing to finish its meal and come for the dessert. We are sending an answer. What answer, sir? Our missiles are firecrackers to them. Not missiles, son. A message. One they can understand. You and your squad are being reassigned. Operation Stray Dog is a go. Get to the rally point Gamma. Now. The link died. Kalen looked at his squad, their faces pale under the hellish dual light of Earth's fires and the dying lights of the consortium fleet. The spectators were gone. The mockery was over. All that was left was the fight and a desperate, insane plan with a name that fit. A stray dog, biting the heel of a god. Rally Point Gamma was not a military base. It was the skeleton of a pre-war orbital launch facility, hidden in a desert mountain range. When Kalen's squad arrived, transported by a battered, stealth-modified VTOL, the scale of Operation Stray Dog began to dawn on him. The cavernous main hangar, carved into the mountain itself, buzzed with a frantic, focused energy. Engineers in exosuits welded plating onto a shape that made Kalen's breath catch. It was a ship, but unlike any he'd ever seen. It had the brutal, angular lines of a human warship, all armor plate, weapon hardpoints, and rocket nozzles, but it was being built around a core that shimmered with borrowed alien technology. Consortium-derived gravity plates were being wired into human inertial dampeners. A captured, miniature version of a Sinorian pulse cannon was being jury-rigged onto a human missile battery. Colonel Hayes, a man with a face like granite and eyes that had seen too many last stands, met them on the gantry. This, he said, pointing at the hybrid beast of a vessel, is the unyielding Resolve, our first and only interstellar warship. Its hull is a composite of our latest boron carbide weave and scavenged consortium shield emitter lattice. It will take a hit. Its drive is a hack job, a Zilok crystalline FTL initiator stuffed into a modified fusion torch. We don't know how fast it will go, or if it'll tear itself apart. Why? Kalen asked, the simple word holding a universe of confusion. Why send one ship? Why us? To die for them? Hayes turned, his gaze piercing. Not for them, Sergeant. For us. The Devourer doesn't negotiate. It will consume the consortium, and then it will come here. We have, by our best estimates, maybe 2 years. The consortium has weeks. We're not going out there to be heroes. We're going out there to study, to learn, and to send a message. What message? That they were wrong, Hayes said, a fierce pride in his voice. That violence, raw, unfiltered, and directed, is not a disease to be cured. It is a tool, and humanity are master craftsmen. You will link up with what's left of the consortium fleet at the Glida Forge, a shipyard world on the frontier. They are making a final stand. You will observe their tactics, and then you will demonstrate ours. The training was not in weapons. They knew their weapons. It was in the alien tech crammed into the unyielding Resolve. A young, brilliant, and terrified engineer named Eris, a consortium exchange student who had been stranded on Earth, was their frantic tutor. This is the Universal Translator Field Generator, Eris said, his multi-jointed hands fluttering over a smooth console. It projects a meaning field. It will make your words felt, but it works on conceptual frameworks. Your military jargon, your metaphors may not translate. What about this? Lopez asked, slapping the main console. That is a mess. That runs your point defense systems. Projectiles. The consortium hasn't used kinetic weapons in millennia. They are considered unclean. Unclean works, Chin muttered, checking the bearings on a large, rotary cannon they'd insisted on installing. The launch was not dignified. The unyielding Resolve shuddered violently as its patched-together drive ignited, tearing itself from the mountain hangar in a storm of fire and noise that was the antithesis of the graceful, silent ascents of consortium vessels. To the few remaining alien probes, it must have looked like a piece of the planet had violently coughed something into space. The journey through the FDL tunnel, crafted by the unstable Zilok crystal, was a nightmare of screaming metal, buckling bulkheads, and terrifying flashes of non-Euclidean space. They were not traveling. They were being violently hurled. When they reverted to normal space, the view through the main screen silenced them all. The Glida Forge was a magnificent ring-world segment, a jewel of construction, and it was being systematically dismantled. The unbound Devourer's fleet was here, but the entity itself dominated the view. It was not so much a ship as a cancerous growth in space, a pulsing, planet-sized knot of organic and mechanical horror. Tendrils of green energy reached out, and wherever they touched consortium vessels, the ships didn't explode. They withered, their lights dying, their hulls crumbling to dust that was then drawn back into the Devourer. The consortium fleet, A beautiful array of glittering geometric ships fought with breathtaking, feudal elegance. Beams of coordinated energy, complex harmonic frequencies designed to disrupt consciousness, psychic pulses that could calm a star. The Devourer absorbed them all, seeming to grow stronger with each attack. Eris, trembling at the comms, open a channel. Consortium Remnant Fleet, this is the Terran vessel Unyielding Resolve, responding to your distress, requesting coordinates and tactical integration. The response, when it came, was not from a tactical officer. It was from an old, tired voice, the voice of a Glida Forge Elder. Terran? The Violent Ones? From the quarantine world? Your presence is noted, but your assistance is irrelevant. This foe is beyond physical combat. It consumes will. It feeds on sentient strife. Your primitive aggression would only nourish it. You have made a futile journey. Withdraw if you can. Witness the end of civilization and carry the tale to your noisy tomb. The channel closed. On the bridge, the squad stood in stunned silence. After all this, they were dismissed. Irrelevant. Kalen looked at the screen, at the beautiful, dying ships, at the arrogant, all-consuming horror. He saw a pattern. The consortium attacks were broad, strategic, aiming to disable. The Devourer's tendrils moved slowly, methodically, assured of its invincibility. Sir, Chen said, voice tight. They're forming a new harmonic pattern. Look, those three cruisers are moving into a resonance triad. Kalen saw it. A beautiful, complex ballet of ships, positioning themselves to unleash a combined psychic blast. It would take them 60 seconds to align. A Devourer tendril, languid and sure, was drifting towards them, ready to feast on the burst of energy. All stations, Kalen said, his voice calm, cutting through the despair. Weapons free. Target that tendril approaching the triad. Not the main body. The tendril. Adi Spoon, August. Sergeant. The Elder said, the Elder is about to be dead. Lopez, target with the main railgun. Chun, coordinate point defense for incoming debris. Finn, give me every ounce of power to the engines. We're not going to harmonize. We're going to interrupt. The Unyielding Resolve, a crude, angular blot against the stars, turned and accelerated with a brutal, straight-line thrust that would have sheared a consortium ship in half. It ignored the grand battle, zeroing in on the single, drifting tendril. To the consortium, it looked like a suicide run. At optimal range, Lopez fired. The railgun was a primitive weapon, a magnetic launch of a solid tungsten projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. There was no brilliant energy beam, just a brief, violent shudder through the ship. The projectile struck the tendril not with an explosion, but with an impact of sheer kinetic ferocity. The tendril, designed to absorb and dissipate energy, was not prepared for an object that carried no energy signature to absorb, only pure, undiluted momentum. It fractured. A spiderweb of cracks erupted along its length, and the green light within flickered and died. The severed tip floated away, inert. On the consortium command channel, a stunned silence. The elegant resonance triad, now unthreatened, completed its alignment. A wave of shimmering golden energy slammed into the Devourer's main body. This time it flinched, a minuscule but definite recoil. The old Glida Elder's voice returned, breathless with shock. Terran vessel, what did you do? Kalen stared at the screen, at the damaged tendril. We attacked a part it was willing to lose. You were attacking a god. We just cut off its finger. He paused, letting the translator field carry the cold, human certainty. Now let's talk about how to make it bleed. A stunned silence hung over the consortium command frequency, thicker than the void itself. It was broken by a burst of static and a new, sharp voice. Terran vessel, this is Flight Imperator Valen of the Voxen Skywing. Your impact was statistically anomalous. Your theory is barbaric. Transmit your telemetry. Kayla nodded to Eris, who sent the data packet. The railgun specs, the projectile composition, the targeting logic, simple, brutal, and direct. The consortium AI would digest it in microseconds. The Glida Elder's voice returned, weary but with a new, faint thread of something. Not hope, desperate curiosity. Your kinetic weapon, it bypassed the Devourer's energy dissipation field. It treats physical mass as inconsequential, a flaw in its ancient design. It's not a design flaw, Kalen said, watching as the Devourer, for the first time, shifted its bulk slightly, a new tendril beginning to regrow from the stump. It's an assumption. You all fight with energy. It's built to eat energy. We fight with rocks. It didn't account for the rock. Your metaphor is crude, Valen stated, but the data is irrefutable. We are formulating a new attack pattern. We will provide a distortion field to mask your vessel's energy signature. You will perform another. Cut. The next hour was a chaotic, terrifying ballet. The consortium ships, masters of subtlety, wove a complex net of interference fields. To the Devourer's senses, the unyielding resolve became a ghost, a faint, insignificant blip of confused particles. Meanwhile, human and alien tech strained in a screaming symbiosis. The ship shuddered as it was pushed beyond any design limit, its human-engineered frame groaning under accelerations the gravity plates could only partially compensate for. They struck twice more, each time targeting a specific, threatening tendril or a nascent energy-gathering node on the Devourer's surface. Each impact was a violent, localized shock, a crack of thunder in the silent void. The Devourer began to react. It was no longer a lazy god swatting flies. It started to track the unyielding resolve, lashing out with faster, more aggressive tendrils. Green energy beams, which had ignored them before, now sought them out. Shield failure on deck 4. Finn yelled, as a near miss scorched the hull, melting consortium plating like butter. We can't take a direct hit. Then, we don't get hit, Kalen growled. Chun, pattern delta. Random, chaotic thrust. No predictable vectors. The unyielding resolve began to move not like a consortium vessel with graceful arcs, but like a berserk insect, jerking, spinning, reversing in bursts that violated elegant physics. It was infuriating, unpredictable, and it kept them alive. The consortium saw an opportunity. While the Devourer's attention was split, they assembled a new weapon, a focused will cannon, designed to project a singular, amplified psychic command, cease. It was the pinnacle of their civilized warfare, an appeal to reason. The cannon fired. A wave of profound, pacifying intention washed over the Devourer. The entire battle seemed to pause. The green pulses dimmed. For 3 seconds, it worked. Then, from the Devourer came a feedback pulse. It was not an energy weapon. It was a wave of pure, amplified hunger, a psychic scream that mirrored and perverted the consortium's command into consume. The wave hit the consortium fleet. Ships didn't explode. Their crews did. Beings of light snuffed out. Gas bags ruptured in despair. Mineral forms cracked with existential dread. The fleet's coordination shattered into a chaos of individual terror and madness. The Glida Elder's voice came through broken. It reflects our essence back at us, corrupted. Our harmony becomes its weapon. Kalen saw it on his screen. The beautiful fleet was coming apart, not from outside damage, but from within. The very thing that made them civilized, their shared psychic bond, their empathic connections, had become a conduit for the Devourer's poison. The unyielding resolve, shielded by its lack of sophisticated psychic technology and the sheer, noisy, emotional chaos of its human crew, was unaffected. The wave washed over them, causing nothing worse than a spike of headache and a profound sense of unease. We're still in the fight, Lopez reported. But they're not. They're losing their minds out there. Kalen understood. The consortium's strength was its weakness. Their unity was a vulnerability. Humanity's weakness, their individualism, their emotional volatility, their stubborn, personal defiance, was, in this moment, a shield. Open a channel to the Elder. All frequencies. Kalen's mind raced. piecing together a terrible, necessary plan. You are untouched. The elder's voice was a whisper of awe and horror. Our civilization, our greatest achievement, it has doomed us. Your civilization is trying to talk a cancer out of growing, Kalen said, his voice iron. It's not listening. You need to stop being a choir and start being a mob. A mob? You have one ship left that can fight on its terms. Ours. We need a target. Not a limb. The heart. The brain. Something that will hurt. Silence. Then, Valen's voice, strained but clear. There is a theory. The core, the center of the mass. It pulses with a unique energy signature. It is likely the nexus of its consciousness. It is the most heavily protected point. Protection is energy-based? Kalen asked. Presumably. Then, our rock might get through. Can you get us there? One shot. Everything we have. The elder spoke, a death rattle of dignity. We can. What is left of our will, we will use not to attack, but to clear a path. We will create a psychic funnel, a tunnel of screaming silence. It will be a road of our agony. It will last, perhaps 20 of your seconds. You must travel it. It's a one-way trip, Chin stated quietly, looking at the navigational plot. Even if we hit it, the backlash. Kalen looked at his crew. Lopez, steady. Chun, calculating. Finn, scared but resolute. Eris, the alien, trembling but with a new, fierce light in his eyes. They all nodded. There were no grand speeches. They were Terrans. This was the job. Do it, Kalen said to the elder. What followed was the most profound and terrible thing Kalen had ever witnessed. The remaining consortium ships, instead of trying to calm or harmonize, did the one thing their culture considered the ultimate blasphemy. They turned their psychic amplifiers inward and broadcasted a focused, screaming torrent of their individual, raw, chaotic terror, pain, and despair. It was a psychic scar in the universe, a road of pure, undiluted suffering. The devourer recoiled from it. It was a taste too bitter, even for it. The path was clear. All power to engines. All power to the railgun. Spool it to 200%. Kalen ordered. The unyielding resolve shot forward, a crude dagger down a highway of ghosts. The ship screamed in protest, shedding plates, trailing fire and coolant. Tendrils lashed at the edges of the psychic tunnel, but could not penetrate its awful purity. They saw the core, a pulsing, green-black orb the size of a small moon, veined with lightning. Target locked, Lopez yelled, her hands flying over the controls. Fire! The railgun discharged with a cataclysmic sound that ruptured decks. The tungsten projectile, superheated to a plasma state by the launch, streaked across the final distance. It struck the core. There was no sound. The green light at the heart of the devourer flared, then contracted. Then it exploded outward in a silent, slow-motion shockwave of dissolving matter and dying energy. The unyielding resolve, caught in the fringe of the blast, was hurled end over end into the dark, a broken, burning piece of slag, its message delivered. Silence. Not the silence of peace, but the deafening, hollow silence after a cataclysm. The unyielding resolve tumbled, powerless, through a cloud of fine, gray dust that was all that remained of the unbound devourer. The ship was a corpse. Internal gravity was gone. Fires sputtered in broken conduits, starved of oxygen. The only light came from emergency battery-powered strips and the cold glow of the stars through cracked viewports. In the wreckage of the bridge, Kalen stirred. Pain was a distant, comprehensive fact. He was strapped into his command chair, which had saved his life. Around him, the others were moving, groaning. Miraculously, they were all alive. The ship's brutal, over-engineered human frame had held, just barely. Report. He croaked, his throat dry. Lopez, her face bloodied from a gash on her forehead, was already at a dead console. No power. Primary, secondary, backup, all gone. Life support is offline. Hull integrity questionable. We're breathing the air we have left. Chin pulled himself to a viewport. The devourer, it's gone. Just dust. The consortium fleet. His voice trailed off. The beautiful ships were still there, but they were dark. No running lights, no energy signatures. They drifted like tombstones. Eris, the consortium engineer, was sobbing quietly, a soft, chiming sound. They are all empty. The feedback, the final broadcast, it burned out their neural cores. They sacrificed their minds to make that path. The weight of it settled on them. An entire civilization's military might, its greatest minds, had extinguished themselves to create a window for a single, primitive projectile. The cost was unimaginable. Finn was trying to get a comms unit to work. Nothing. No signals. Just static. They were alone. Adrift in a graveyard, in a dying ship with limited air. They had one, and they were going to suffocate in the dark, unseen and unremembered. Hours passed. The air grew stale and cold. They huddled together, conserving warmth, saying little. There was nothing to say. They had done the impossible, and the universe, it seemed, did not care. Then a light, a small, shimmering craft, like a tear of liquid silver, emerged from the shadow of a derelict consortium cruiser. It approached cautiously, scanning the unyielding resolve with intricate beams of light. It docked with a soft, magnetic clunk against their ruined airlock. The inner door hissed open. Standing there was not a warrior, but a single Glida. It was smaller than the Elder, its crystalline body dulled with grief, but it held itself with a solemn dignity. It was unarmed. "I am Remnant Designate Ilera," it said, its voice projected directly into their minds, the universal translator still functioning on its end. "I represent what remains of the Glida Forge civilian authority. We monitored the conclusion. We have come to retrieve you." They were taken aboard the silver craft, which was warm, clean, and full of air that tasted oddly sweet. They were given medical attention by delicate, floating drones. The craft then flew them not to a warship, but to the central habitation ring of the Glida Forge itself. The world that met their eyes was one of silent, profound mourning. The streets were not destroyed, but they were empty. Buildings of singing crystal stood whole, yet dark. The few Glida they saw moved slowly, their inner light dimmed. The psychic atmosphere was not one of panic, but of a deep, resonant sorrow, a chord of loss played across an entire species. They were brought to a simple, austere chamber. Before them stood a gathering of beings from many species, survivors, civilians, low-level functionaries. They were the ones who had not been psychically linked to the fleet, the ones whose minds were not advanced enough to be weapons or targets. They looked at the humans, bruised, bloody, clad in scorched and pragmatic battle dress amidst their elegant robes, with expressions that were no longer amusement or disdain, but something closer to awe, terror, and profound confusion. Ilera gestured to them. The consortium military arm is gone. Their wisdom, their experience, their harmony extinguished. We who remain, we do not know how to process what has happened. You fought it, not with harmony, but with discord, not with shared will, but with isolated violent intent. You survived its psychic annihilation where we could not. An elderly Sinorian, its feathers drooping, stepped forward. You killed a being that fed on sentient energy by striking it with dead rock. You used our civilization's greatest sacrifice as a distraction. Your strategy was not one of overcoming, but of applied brutality. It is morally incomprehensible. Kalen, standing tall despite his injuries, met its gaze. You asked for help. You defined the problem as an enemy that consumes will. We defined it as a thing that needs to be killed. Our definitions were different, but at what cost? A Voxan civilian whispered. Our warriors are empty shells, our greatest minds silent. You have saved our bodies, but at the price of our soul. Your soul was already on the menu, Lopez said bluntly, her human directness slicing through the chamber's grief. You were losing. You were all going to die. We offered a way to live. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't civilized, but it worked. The room trembled with the shock of the statement. It was true, and its truth was more painful than the Devourer's beams. Ilera looked at Kalen, her crystal facets reflecting his weary, resolute face. You have shown us a terrible truth, that there are monsters in the dark against which light and reason are not shields, but feasts. You have shown us that the capacity for directed, sacrificial violence is not a childhood ailment to be outgrown. It is a vital immune response. She paused, the weight of a galactic paradigm shifting in her words. The consortium, as it was, is over. We must build something new, and we do not know how. She extended a slender, crystalline limb towards Kalen and his squad. You must tell us. You must explain this humanity, not as spectators, not as judges, as students. Kalen looked at his crew, then back at the gathered remnants of a galaxy. They had come to send a message. The message had been received. Now, they had to write the translation. And the first word was not warrior. It was teacher. The humans were given quarters in a section of the Glidoforge that had been retrofitted. A word that here meant elegant. Self-assembling crystalline structures were forced to accommodate crude, rectangular rooms with manual doors and opaque walls. Privacy was a human quirk the Glido were struggling to understand, but they were trying. Kalen was not resting. He stood before a transparent wall, looking out at the silent, majestic ruin of the forge. The debriefing had been less an interrogation and more a series of stunned, philosophical inquiries that felt more exhausting than the battle. A soft chime announced a visitor. It was Alara. Sergeant Vance. May I enter? He nodded. She glided in, her form subtly brighter than the others. She had been appointed their liaison, the one with the strongest tolerance for cognitive dissonance, as her peers put it. We have analyzed the battle data, she began, without preamble. Your vessel's maneuvers, your decision tree, your communication patterns. It is chaos. There is no predictive model. When Lopez fired the final shot, there was a 73% statistical probability she would target the emerging energy spire, not the core. She targeted the core. Why? Kalen thought for a moment. The spire was a threat. The core was the kill. She saw the difference. But the data suggested the spire was the immediate tactical priority. It was charging to fire upon the Star Weaver. Lopez isn't a data point, Alara. She's a Marine. She saw a chance to end the fight, not just survive the next 10 seconds. She took it. Alara's internal light pulsed, a sign of intense processing. Individual initiative overriding consensus tactical logic. It is terrifying, and it saved the Star Weaver regardless. We cannot replicate this. You shouldn't try to replicate it, Kalen said, turning to her. You should try to understand it. You fight as a single mind with a million bodies. We fight as a million minds with a single purpose. The difference is the wiring. Over the next days, the teaching began. It was not lectures on warfare. It was something more fundamental. Chun, the squad systems expert, found himself in a Glida engineering collective trying to explain redundancy. You have a single, perfect crystal conduit for primary power, Chun said, pointing at a schematic. If it fails, you have a secondary, perfectly harmonized conduit. If the flaw is in the design, both fail. Perfection is the ideal, the head engineer chimed. Perfection is brittle, Chun countered. He showed them a human schematic, a tangle of wires, backup systems, analog overrides, and jury-rigged solutions. It's messy, it's inefficient, but if the primary fails, the backup might work in a way you never planned for. Because it's different. In a medical suite, Lopez and Finn were surrounded by healers. A healer had asked about their psychological stabilization rituals after trauma. We talk, Lopez said simply. To a mind smoother, a psychic therapist, to each other, sometimes to a bottle of bad alcohol. We tell the story. We laugh about the parts that weren't funny at the time. We get angry. We cry. The healers were appalled. You relive the trauma? Voluntarily? This would cause recursive psychic scarring. It scars anyway, Finn said, his young face serious. Talking about it. It makes the scar a story you own, not a ghost that owns you. The Glida watched, recorded, and debated. They were building a new galactic compact, and the human example was a stone thrown into their serene pond of logic. Some factions recoiled, calling humans a necessary evil, a vaccine that was itself a mild disease. Others, like Alara and a growing number of younger beings, saw something else: resilience. The turning point came during a Security Council meeting. Representatives from a dozen surviving species were arguing about how to police the now vulnerable trade routes. The old ways, psychic trust bonding, shared honor systems, were deemed insufficient after the Devourer. A Sinorian delegate proposed a complex, energy-based web of detection. A Voxan suggested a fleet of harmonized patrol drones. The debate was civilized, theoretical, and going in circles. Kalen, who had been invited as an observer, finally spoke. His voice, unaccustomed to the melodic rhythms of the chamber, sounded like grinding stones. "You're building another perfect crystal," he said. "What happens when someone finds a new kind of hammer?" The room fell silent, all eyes on him. "You need a deterrent," he continued. "Not a perfect wall. A promise." "A promise?" the Sinorian trilled. "A promise that if you attack a compact world, you will not face a harmonized fleet. You will face something you cannot predict. You will face beings who will not try to outthink your weapons, but will instead figure out how to break you, using whatever tool is at hand: a rock, a virus, a corrupted data stream, or their own bare hands. You will face a response that is not proportional, but absolute. You will face us." He let the translator field carry the cold, simple certainty. "Not as conquerors, as guardians, the stray dogs of the galaxy. Let the wolves know we're here. Then, maybe, they'll decide the flock isn't worth it." The concept was revolutionary. It was also barbaric. It was also undeniably effective. A month later, a ceremony was held in the great forum of the Forge. The humans stood before the assembled remnants of the galaxy. They were still dressed in their repaired uniforms, a stark contrast to the flowing robes and gleaming carapaces. Alara spoke, her voice broadcast across the stars. "The old consortium sought perfection and found fragility. We have learned a hard lesson from a harsh teacher. We now understand that diversity is not merely aesthetic. It is strategic. That individuality is not chaos, but a wellspring of adaptability. That the capacity for violence, when chained to a moral purpose and a will to protect, is not a sin. It is the final argument of the free." She turned to Kalen, Sergeant Kalen Vance, and the crew of the Unyielding Resolve. "The Compact does not offer you membership. You are beyond our categories. Instead, we offer a pact, a request. Be our shield. Be our final, terrible answer to the darkness. Teach us not how to be like you, but how to make a space for you, and in doing so, make a space for our own survival." She presented him with a data crystal, the schematics for a new vessel, designed by our engineers, incorporating the lessons of the Unyielding Resolve. "It is yours, if you will accept this role." Kalen took the crystal. He looked at his squad, then at the sea of alien faces, no longer mocking but solemn, respectful, and afraid, not of him, but of a universe that required things like him. He didn't smile. He nodded, a single, human gesture of acceptance. "We'll need a bigger rock," he said, and, for the first time, the galaxy understood a human joke. The sound that followed was not the graceful, harmonic music of the old consortium. It was something new, raw, and alive. It was the sound of a galaxy learning to laugh, not from a place of serene safety, but from the hard-won ground of a future they would now fight for together.